Bienvenidos and welcome back to Puro Pinche Gol, a place where we discuss all things USMNT y la selección mexicana. My name is Adrian. Joining me once again is my co-host Tocayo, Adrian. Adrian, what's good, man?
Hey, what's up, dude? It's Tuesday, getting ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow's gonna be kind of a short day for me because I'm going home for a couple of days. You know what sucks? I just realized that Tigres is playing here in Austin, so I leave town and they come by. So hopefully they make it, they make it to the next round in Leagues Cup and they play again in Houston or somewhere close. I can drive and see them play.
Yeah, at least you were able to go watch them play in Houston against Inter
Yes,
Miami.
sir.
That's pretty cool. Shout out to Marcelo, who came through from Monterrey to go watch that game with you.
Yes, sir.
And your bro. Looked like a good time. But let's get into today's episode, man. Obviously, if you guys know, Javier Aguirre has been appointed as the new head coach for La Selección Mexicana until the 2026 World Cup, after which his assistant Rafamarquez will take over. So right now it's going to be that duo of Rafamarquez with Javier Aguirre, experienced player with experienced manager. And, an up-and-coming manager, obviously. Rafamarquez, a lot to learn there. But when we discussed in the video of Aguirre's appointment, we kind of joked around saying, Aguirre is going to stick to the guys. He's not going to have a long time to do this 2 years window, right? He's just going to stick to the old, crew. Call back Raúl Jiménez, call back Lozano, call back Guillermo Ochoa. We were kind of joking that he's going to just abandon jaimelozano's integration of youngsters per se, and just stick to what is kind of known at this point. We got thinking, and we got to kind of wanting to do a video where we analyze this in further detail. Because it feels, we were joking, but it feels like that perspective for a lot of people, especially from the last time Javier Aguirre was coach of La Selección Mexicana. We look back at 2010. People don't seem to remember the youngsters that he played. People seem to remember above all, Oscar El Conejo Perez in goal against, instead of Guillermo Ochoa, right? The big, why'd he do that? Obviously he had Cuauhtémoc Blanco there, age 37, Guillermo Franco, age 33. A couple older guys that people seem to kind of focus on when talking about Javier Aguirre and his quote-unquote inability to, integrate youngsters. You did a very detailed agenda where we kind of analyzed that's not necessarily true. But let's get into it and kind of go into detail. We'll be analyzing the 2002 World Cup roster, 2010 World Cup roster for Javier Aguirre, and kind of his squads for his time as a Japan national team coach between 2014 and 2015, and the Egypt national team coach, and see what trends we could kind of find about this topic here. So, Adrian, why don't you start us off with, rewind the clock back to 2002, the Japan 2002 World Cup, and how did that roster look?
Yeah, so it's as you mentioned, when we started, chatting about this, something went off in my mind. I was like, well, I was a little young to remember how many youngsters or how many under 23 players, right? We featured on 2002. So some of the names that I'm going to give, just to give a little caveat, are players who were either 23 or younger at the time the World Cup was played. To give to give a little more context on the 2002 World Cup, Javier Aguirre's roster average age on the roster was 27.3 years, right? And out of the 22 players that he took, the most notable under 23 ones that he featured were Rafaelmarquez, who was, I think, if he wasn't already in Monaco, he was on his way out to Monaco. I believe he was already in Monaco at that time. He wasn't in Barca just yet. But that, he played pretty much all of the 4 matches that Mexico played, 360 minutes, not necessarily all the minutes because he got a red card against the U.S.MNT on that very tragic night in Japan. And he was actually the captain of the team whenever he was 23. Another notable player that he featured, and someone that, we grew up watching, was Gerardo Torrado, midfielder. He played 270 minutes. While he wasn't necessarily, a very like feature or a fixed position on this roster, he was a very key player that was involved in ball recovery and distribution. And so those are 2 notable players. I know I said 3, but it's actually only 2 that were under 23 during the 2002 World Cup. The other one
was Melvin Brown.
Yes, exactly. The other one, my bad. It is actually 3, but Melvin Brown didn't play in match.
Right.
I don't. Yeah, he was just on the bench, so that's why I kind of sort of missed him. But yes, it was Melvin Brown, who was also under 23. He was just not featured in any match whatsoever. So these are three players out of the roster that uh, he actually played.
Yeah, and like you said, two of those integral to that World Cup, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
Rafamarquez, we all know the stellar career he went on to have, and he played in all four of those matches. And Gerardo Torrado played three of those matches, right?
Yes.
So definitely in a World Cup, playing two under 23 players in a squad that wasn't necessarily old, right? I mean, the average age was 27.3. He had a pretty decent squad in
Yeah.
terms of youth and mixture of experience and kind of that average age. So yeah, definitely a goes against the perception that is sometimes seen with Javier Aguirre that he just plays nothing but
Yeah.
old guys.
To, to put things into perspective, the oldest player on that World Cup was Claudio Suarez with 33 years of age. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the oldest guy.
Well, Jorge Campos, no, wasn't he there too? 35.
Uh,
I think he
yeah,
was
there we go.
35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But
There
he
we go.
did have
Yes, that is correct.
a couple 33-year-olds. Luis Hernandez was there at 33 as well, and Garcia Aspe, I believe, though I
Hmm.
don't think he played.
You're right.
But yeah, a good average age for a World Cup, and one that, like we said, ultimately got overshadowed by the 2010 World Cup and that goalkeeping decision that he made. What can you tell us about the 2010 World Cup in terms of the average age and other youngsters that he implemented there? Because I think people will be shocked that there was a lot more in that one than there was in 2002.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. If I'm not mistaken, he had that roster had around. If we consider Memo Ochoa, who I think either turned 24 during the World Cup or shortly before the World Cup, but if we count Ochoa, he had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine under 23 players on the roster. So that's actually a little over a third, a little less than
Yeah,
the half of the roster. And this is very interesting because, of course, this was also a moment where Mexico came from winning the World Cup, the under
17.
17 World Cup, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
with some names that I'm going to mention in a minute, but that actually helped this specific roster for this World Cup to have, or at least to feature, younger players on the squad.
Right.
As far as the actual scout and Javier Aguirre selection, this roster of players had an average age of 25.4 years, so even younger than 8 years before. And most of the players that he featured constantly on those matches were, as you remember, Giovanni Dos Santos, who played all matches 360 minutes. We have Carlos Vela, who was mainly he was essentially a starter, but always either getting subbed off, or if I'm not mistaken, he also had an injury, or he had to sit. I mean, he wasn't necessarily playing all 90 minutes every single match, but he played 115 minutes on that World Cup. Hector Moreno,
Mm-hmm.
while he got called up, I don't think he played any minutes on that World Cup, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but please double check me on that because I am not too sure if it was
It's
here.
been
It was
14 years. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. And then we have Chicharito Hernandez,
Of
who
course.
yeah, Chicharito was actually, he was kind of a super sub, but he was also a starter against France, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a very good match against them.
Mm-hmm.
224 minutes for El Chicharito Hernandez. And lastly, we have Pablo Barrera, who was also either a super sub or a 60 minutes kind of player for El Vasco Aguirre, and he played a total of 158 minutes. So those are some of the out of the nine players that he had under 23 years of age, those were the ones that he featured the most. And I do want to say that Efrain Juarez was also featured, well, not significantly, but he was, a prominent player with El Vasco Aguirre during this World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm more than happy to get double check. Like, hey, drop a comment below if you think that I'm missing Efrain Juarez. I want to say that Efrain Juarez was also part of this
Well,
regular
he was on the
feature.
roster, right? But
He's in the
just
roster.
on to what extent he played, I can't recall.
Exactly.
Same with Torres Nilo. I don't think he made an appearance, but he was
He got
another one
called
that
up,
was
yes.
under the
He got called up.
23. Yeah,
That's shortly before he got bought by Tigres, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
right back when he was still with his Atlas days, right?
Yes, exactly.
Um, but yeah, I mean, 25.4 years, 2 years younger than his average age there in the 2002 World Cup. So although he was overshadowed, like we said, by Cuauhtemoc Blanco's age, 37, by Oscar Perez being 37.
I know.
Even though shout out to Cuauhtemoc Blanco, he scored at that World Cup, right?
Yeah.
We still saw a lot more. Like you said, one third of the squad was youngsters under 23. Something that we haven't seen from Mexico maybe since, man.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean to have and implement that much youth at such an important tournament. Definitely can I guess give hope to Mexico fans here as Javier Aguirre takes his charge of his third time in charge of La
You know
Selección.
who else I'm missing, dude, on 2010? It's Andres Guardado. And I keep forgetting that he was super young when he got called up the first time in 2006 with La Volpe. He was, I think, like 18 or 19. So he technically was 23 or under 23 during this World Cup. So that's another one. So you had like around 10 players who were on 23 on that roster.
That was when he was at Depor, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. Like I was missing another one. It was a very who
The
later
critical
becomes
one, man.
exactly
Yeah.
super critical and it later became like a very stellar player for eltri. But yes, now that you were mentioning all this stuff, I kept on thinking I'm missing someone, I'm missing a name, and it is Andres Guardado.
Yeah. No, but I mean, in both tournaments, like we said, Aguirre really relied on young players. But the 2010 World Cup squad had a more pronounced, more profound youthful presence in a
Yes.
lot of crucial positions, and he gave those opportunities to a lot of youth there.
Hmm.
During his time, man, as head coach of Japan, he led them through the 2015 AFC Asian Cup, right, and a lot of friendlies. He did have some youth players that he implemented. I'm not even going to try to pronounce some of these names. Goku or Gaku, Shibasaki, Takashi Usami, 22 years old, both midfielder forwards. Yuya Kubo, he was 21, and Higashiguchi, he was 22, goalkeeper. He got called up but didn't play at all under him. So, during that 1 year-ish, 10 years, these guys were kind of the four younger under 23 guys that he selected. In his defense, he knows a lot less about Japan and Japan's players than Mexico. So he probably kind of. It's been a while since he took charge. 10 years since he was in Japan, but I remember there wasn't a huge generational shift when he took over. He was kind of using
Yeah.
the players that were already established,
Hmm.
so he didn't really give too many chances there. But I mean, it was 1 year, and he did play, like we said, Shibasaki 3 games during the Asian Cup, Usami a couple appearances in friendlies, as well as Kubo. So that trend kind of continued there.
Yeah,
What,
and
what about?
to be a
Yeah,
little
go for
to
it.
be a little fair, it's that was also the time when he was getting, I think, accused about setting up matches, like, right,
Match
how do you
fixing.
say? Yeah, exactly, match
Yeah.
fixing. Here we go, match fixing. With Zaragoza, and that's why he got fired from Japan, because they just didn't want to be associated with it. But to your point, um, like the one thing that I want to stress really clearly is that we're not saying that Javier Aguirre is a coach who has an eye for catching talent and identifying talent, right? But what we're saying is that he is someone who will not think twice before bringing a youngster who's doing a good job, right? And he's not afraid to play him. He's not afraid to have this mix of young players in the squad with some experienced ones as well. Because I think that sometimes people get the feeling that just because we have all these names right on the roster, it means that he found them, but he really didn't. These are players that were coming up before he was even taking over.
Established young players, right? He
Exactly.
likes to give
Exactly.
established young players a
Hmm.
chance. We wouldn't say he's the best scouter, the best recruiter, the best guy that will give this youngster that's hardly known. No, like we could probably expect him to get Marcelo Flores time,
Yeah.
to give youngsters like that, that are that are coming up, and that have a couple caps for Mexico that maybe people think should have gotten a chance at the Copa America.
Yeah.
Expect them to get time, but will he implement and bring in new, fresh faces?
That we
Maybe,
don't
but
know.
yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. Yeah, nah, but what did Javier Aguirre do for Egypt,
Egypt.
man? Yeah,
He also was like there for like a year and some change. He played the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations, I think, or at least several qualifiers for the coming World Cup. Um, just like in Japan, he featured four different players, or at least these are the four ones that I was able to see more frequently on his call-ups. We have Mahmoud Hamdi El Wench, I think that's his nickname, El Wench, age 23, center back. He played 90 minutes under Javier Aguirre in one match during AFCON. Mahmoud Hassan, they called him, I guess, Trezeguet. 23 years of age, winger, 450 minutes, all matches in the AFCON. Guarda, 23, attacking midfielder, 180. He was a substitute and sometimes a starter in AFCON. And then we have Mohamed Mahmoud, 20 years of age, midfielder, 63 minutes. He was a sub in qualifiers and friendlies. So, again, I really don't think that he went to Egypt and then set up a scouting network, or did some researches to find the most exciting talent under 23 in the country. He probably had someone. He relied on someone within either the federation or his staff to give him a report and say, all right, who are the established youngsters, and which ones can we, which ones he can feature or bring in that will bolster the team. That will match well with experienced players. But this I think this is something that no pundits do a lot of digging, and I think it's nice to see that even though we have examples with Mexico back in 2002 and 2010, he had somewhat of a similar pattern on two different countries that for sure he was not by any means an expert on that specific region of the world, right? But it goes to show that this guy is not afraid, as we have said on this episode, to bet on some young talent that is showing promise.
Yeah, and let's hope that trend continues here for 2026 because the project had just started for Jimmy. He was just starting to kind of integrate and have that generational shift. Yeah. So will that continue? I think we could see it a lot more under Rafamarquez when he takes over in 2026, just because that's a long-term project. And
Yeah,
here, Javier Aguirre might be feeling the pressure of I need to get results. But I mean, like you said, and like we've seen in the past, he's always only had that pressure like for 2 years, right?
exactly.
So it's something he's used to, and even back then when he had those 2 year cycles before, he implemented youth. So let us know in the comments below, guys. What do you think of Javier Aguirre's third approach here, the three? Do you think it's going to be similar to kind of the trend he has back in the day? Will we see him implementing these youth guys, giving them chances, well established youth players at this point, or do you think he'll kind of rely on the old guns? Let us know in the comments below, and yeah, definitely let us know. At the end, man, as we wrap up this episode, bro, where can listeners find us?
They can always find us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on the notifications. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast on. Last but not least, you can also find us on Twitter. Not Twitter. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok. We post memes, latest news, and shorts of our episodes.
Yeah, just be sure to follow us on your preferred social media platform of choice. There, man, another good episode, man. Good analysis of Javier Aguirre there, and we'll wait and see, how it goes here in the next 2 years. See you next one, brother.
Always a pleasure, my guy. See ya.
See ya.
Deuce.